Every town has its history, and Saratoga Springs is no exception. It's not just known as the home of Skidmore College, it has a rich local history that residents are proud of. But why is it that the majority of Skidmore students can't name one of their town's most famous inhabitants? And even the town of Saratoga forgot the name Solomon Northup until recently.
And the Oscar goes to... "12 Years a Slave." Brad Pitt, Diddy Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, Steve McQueen, and Anthony Katagas, producers.
In February 2013, the film 12 Years a Slave took the trophy for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. The movie is based on a little-known autobiography of the same name, written by New Yorker Solomon Northup. Until the movie was released and gained international acclaim, it seemed as though this important man and his book were lost to history.
What do you know about Solomon Northup?
Who? I don't really know his names.
What? I don't know anything about that person.
The name rings a bell.
Have you ever heard of the movie 12 Years a Slave?
Yes, I have. I love the movie.
Oh yeah, I recognize that name now.
Now I remember who Solomon Northup is.
With the life of such an important man literally surrounding them, how is it that Skidmore students don't even know his name?
My name is Rachel Seligman, and I'm the Assistant Director for Curatorial Affairs at the Tang Teaching Museum at Skidmore College. And I'm the author of the book Solomon Northup, the complete story of the author of 12 Years a Slave, along with my co-authors Clifford Brown and David Fisk. My first contact with Solomon Northup came as a curator in the late 90s when I read a copy of the slave narrative of 12 Years a Slave. And I was instantly and completely taken with it, thought it was just the most incredible story I had ever read, and was really quite shocked and amazed to realize that I had not heard of this story before that moment. Having grown up in this area, having gone to school in this area, it was really unbelievable to me that this was my first knowledge of the story, which is such an amazing and powerful piece of local history.
So he was a free black man in New York before the Civil War, I think.
He lived in Saratoga, and that's where he was kidnapped.
He's a free man who is mistaken for a slave. Essentially, it's an excuse to enslave him. He's captured, sent to the South, spends 12 years as a slave, and eventually comes back to freedom in the North.
Solomon Northup was born in 1808 in Minerva, New York, just north of Saratoga. He was born a free man. In 1834, after selling his farm, he moved with his wife and children to the new resort town, Saratoga Springs.
Solomon Northup moved to Saratoga in 1834 with his family, and it's likely that he did so because Saratoga had become, over the past 20 and 30 years, a boom town, a place of enormous activity, of economic growth, and it would have looked to him, who had been farming and living in rural upstate New York, like a place of immense opportunities.
It was in Saratoga that he met the men who would eventually sell him into slavery. They convinced Northup, an accomplished violinist, to accompany them to Washington, D.C. He was drugged, imprisoned, and transported to Louisiana. He stayed there as a slave for 12 years. It was thanks to those who knew Northup, including some in Saratoga, that he was found and rescued. Upon his return, Northup chronicled his experiences in his famous autobiography, 12 Years a Slave. He remained an outspoken abolition activist for the rest of his known life. His date of death is unknown. There are still remnants of the Saratoga that Northup knew. In fact, places we pass every day hold important significance in Northup's story. During the summer season, there was a lot of work for Northup. He had many odd jobs in town and would have known Broadway well, walking up and down the sidewalks as Skidmore students do today. Northup was familiar with North Broadway. He worked at a boarding house that once stood on the corner of North Broadway and 3rd Street, on the edge of Skidmore's campus. He lived in several of the old hotels in Saratoga, as well as a house near Congress Park. It was near Congress Park in 1841 that he met the men who would eventually kidnap him.
Saratoga in the 1840s was a place in which he would have interacted with a lot of different kinds of people, and he talks about Saratoga being a place where some of his more positive qualities of thrift and of economy and of a kind of strong moral character, he refers to Saratoga as having dissipated some of that a little bit, of it being a place in which some of your maybe less wonderful qualities were encouraged to come out, because there were all kinds of things like gambling, and so there was drinking and gambling and all kinds of perhaps less fabulous activities that you could get entangled with.
Northup's story isn't what most people think of when they are asked about Saratoga's history. Images of Revolutionary War battles, horses, and mineral spas come to mind. But if you know where to look, you can see more obvious tributes to Northup's life and legacy around the downtown area. In 2000, a sign was erected near Congress Park in his honor. When the 2013 movie inspired new interest in Northup, the Visitor Center created a small exhibit. You'll find the autobiography tucked away on the local history shelf of the bookstore, but a lot of people still don't know his name or his story. It's hidden behind the town's more promoted history.
I feel very strongly that local history is enormously important. For one thing, in some sense, all history is local, right? So history begins at the local level. It's how we understand our place and ourselves. But further, making the kinds of direct connections to the past, to history, through what has happened in your place and in the history of your place through the local level is what helps us to understand the larger patterns and the larger implications of those past events on a global scale, and how those smaller events make up and shape history as we know it and as we remember it. So history begins at the local level, and it's really very important for us to examine it and explore it. I think that's really where all the stories begin.
Skidmore does make an effort to educate their students on Saratoga's history, and even Solomon Northup's. In 1999, a Skidmore alumna created Solomon Northup Day in order to honor this local legend. Last year, in 2013, Skidmore formally took over the events. Though the celebration has received a lot of local attention over the years, because it takes place during the summer, many Skidmore students can't participate.
I think the importance for Skidmore students of knowing this story is that it is a story that occurred right here in Saratoga Springs, and it's a way for them to bridge their experience of Skidmore College and of Saratoga with a kind of national understanding of history.
Knowing the history of a place puts it in context. It's amazing to think that people who made history once walked the streets of Broadway and knew places that Skidmore students consider home. Maybe by knowing the life of this extraordinary man and taking pride in the history around them, Skidmore students can uncover other local heroes that are hidden away on the streets of Saratoga Springs.